This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can pre-order Dominaria United right now by going to cardkingdom.com/needsahone or following the link in the description. Hi everyone, I'm Needsahone, and today is Friday, and that means it's time for the 502nd MTG Top 10. In this series, I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. At least, that's normally what I do in this series. But, as is usually the case during my limited set review for brand new sets, one of that week's MTG Top 10s gets taken over by the set review. So, instead of looking at the game's constructed past, we're going to take a look at the limited present with a look at the 10 biggest bombs in Dominaria United Limited. In Magic, bombs are a good thing, at least if you control them. They are cards that are so powerful that they drastically alter a game in your favor. So, these are the 10 cards from Dominaria United that you most want to see in draft or in your sealed pool. Generally, bombs tend to be rares and mythic rares. If you're interested in the best cards of other rarities in this set, I've talked about that too in my full set review. Alright, let's dive in with a look at number 10. At number 10, I've got Silverback Elder, which for 5 mana gives you a 5/7, so that's a great starting point. 3 of it is green. That might be kind of hard to cast sometimes, but this format has pretty good mana, so it's not a huge concern to me. What makes him a bomb, though, isn't just his impressive stats that will almost always mean he's the largest creature on the board. It's the fact that anytime you cast a creature spell, you get a choice between 3 options. Now, none of these options individually is the kind of thing that makes you think that this will just win you the game all on its own, but it really will. If you're just gaining 4 life every time you cast a creature spell, your opponent can basically never kill you. If your opponent controls artifacts or enchantments, you're going to be able to blow those up really efficiently. And if you need more lands, which isn't super likely, considering you played this guy, he can get you those too. And if you're in a deck that's really interested in getting domain, he can really make that happen while helping you ramp. Basically, he's an insane value engine who has 3 abilities that will make every one of your creature spells significantly better. At number 9, I have King Darian, the 48th. He might only be a little 3 mana 2/3, but he buffs your entire board the turn he comes down, and that will almost always give him an immediate impact. So in the early game, he's usually going to make your board way better than your opponent's. Then if you get him in the late game, well, he's still going to do the same thing, but on top of that, he can also use his powerful mana sink ability that makes him larger and cranks out a token, and he even has a third ability that he can sacrifice himself to make all your tokens hexproof and indestructible. That third ability isn't amazing, and you're not going to use it that often in Limited. That's the first 2 abilities that really make Darian into a bomb. No matter when you play him, he is a must-kill who will win you the game. At number 8, it is Shieldred the Apocalypse. So another very efficient creature here, a 4 mana 4/5 with Death Touch is quite impressive, but her abilities are what really push her into bomb range. Every time your opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. Every time you draw a card, you gain 2 life. These are things that just happen on every single turn, and she will very quickly make the life difference between you and your opponent insurmountable, because basically she causes a 4-point life swing every turn cycle at a minimum. If you're also drawing extra cards, or your opponent is, it gets even more ridiculous. So even if she dies after a few turns, she's going to have given you such an advantage that your opponent probably can't win. At number 7, I have Vodaleon Mindsinger. Mind control effects are among the most powerful effects in Magic, and this is a creature that comes with one. No matter when you play it and how much you kick it, you can probably always steal something with it. And if you're kicking it, you can steal pretty much every creature in the format. And doing that definitely isn't impossible. A lot of decks in this format, as I said throughout the set review, are going to be 2-color base, and then be able to splash a 3rd color for off-color kicker costs, because the mana is relatively good in this format. So it isn't like actually kicking this twice is some sort of pipe dream. You're going to be able to do it pretty consistently, especially in like the blue-green ramp deck. But yeah, adding like a 6/6 to the board and stealing your opponent's best creature is the kind of thing that your opponent can't come back from. At number 6, it is Sphinx of Clear Skies. This starts out with amazing stats as a 5 mana 5/5 flyer with Ward 2. Ward, of course, isn't quite hexproof, but it does make it so that your opponent is going to have to pay extra to ever kill this thing, and most of the spells in this format that can kill it already cost a significant amount of mana, so that at worst, they're almost always going to pay more mana than you do to kill the Sphinx. Which isn't amazing, but that's the fail case for the card. What really pushes the Sphinx into bomb range is its domain effect. At worst, the effect is going to allow you to draw a card every single turn, and at best, this turns into fact or fiction, which is a powerful card advantage effect. If this hits your opponent once, you're probably going to win, and if it hits your opponent twice, you're pretty much definitely going to win, between the 10 damage and all the cards it's given you. At number 5, I have Sarah Paragon. This starts out with great stats as a 4-mana 3/4 flyer, but what pushes it into bomb territory is the fact that you can play a land or cast a permanent spell from your graveyard every turn, provided that permanent spell has a mana value of 3 or less. And if it ended there, it would probably already be on the list, but on top of that, you can also gain 2 life when that creature dies. The flip side of that is that creature does get exiled, so you can't just keep bringing it back like you can with Luris, for example, but it is still incredibly powerful. It puts your opponent in a miserable position where any trade they make is really, really bad for them, and it may even let you bring back some really important permanent from earlier in the game. If you can just get 1 permanent back with Sarah Paragon, you're going to win that game 9 times out of 10. It's just that powerful to get a really efficient 2-for-1, and then of course you still have a 4-mana 3/4 flyer running around. At number 4, I have Archangel of Wrath. This is part of the same cycle as the Mindsinger. So the baseline here is a 4-mana 3/5 with flying and lifelink. That in and of itself is not a bomb, it's just a really, really good card, but that's our starting point here. Then when you start talking about kicking this card is when it gets truly insane. It basically becomes a flying Siege Rhino. If you pay 6 for this, you get to do 2 instances of 2 damage to any target. So you can do 4 to 1 thing or 2 to 2 things. And because it has lifelink, you also gain 4 life, and that's where the Siege Rhino comparison comes in. In a lot of ways, it's going to be better than Siege Rhino in a vacuum because you can actually use it to kill creatures. Sometimes casting this will give you a 3-for-1 and 4 life, plus you still have a huge angel in play. It does get less impressive if you're not kicking it, but the baseline is really good. Kicking it once is excellent, and kicking it twice is insane. At number 3, it is Riff, Liberated Primeval. This is another 5-mana 5/5 with flying and ward 2. Great starting point, also gives your other dragons ward 2. And that matters because Riff comes with the powerful ability to generate a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying during your end step anytime a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls was dealt excess damage. Now, you're not always going to be able to make that happen, but it is something that just happens with regularity. People want to trade their 3/1 for your 4/3, for example. It's just something people will do. And what's great is you can either already have Riff in play, or you can wait until your second main phase, play Riff after that has already happened, and then you're paying 5 mana for 9/9 worth of dragon stats across 2 bodies, both have ward 2, and the game's pretty much over at that point. I really don't see it being hard to generate at least 1 dragon with Riff, and obviously if you can do more than that, then the game is really over. So at number 2, I've included 5 cards. That's because they're all part of the same cycle. 4 of these would have made the list for me, and I thought it would have been pretty uninteresting if I had 4 of these Defilers on the list, so instead I decided to put them all together. The only one of these that I think is definitely better than Riff, or the Kicker Angel, or Sarah Paragon is Defiler of Vigor. That one I think is the legitimate second best bomb in the entire set. Obviously all of these are creatures with really great stats, and they come with the ability to reduce the cost of permanent spells of a certain type, where you can pay 2 life instead of 1 of the colored mana symbols on all your permanents of that color. And then they all have an ability that triggers when you cast a permanent of that color. And Defiler of Vigor kind of comes out on top in multiple ways. First, a 5-mana 6/6 Trampler is basically more impressive than the rest of what we see here. And second, its permanent trigger is definitely better than the rest of what we see here. It puts a +1/+1 counter on your entire board. You really only need to cast 1 permanent for this to feel absolutely insane. Below that, the next sort of tier of these Defilers I think is Defiler of Dreams and Defiler of Flesh. Defiler of Dreams draws you a card every time you cast a blue permanent. Defiler of Flesh gives +1/+1 and Menace. to one of your creatures anytime you cast a black permanent. And then at the bottom of the list, even though they're still great, is Defiler of Faith and Defiler of Instinct. Defiler of Faith gives you a 1/1 token every time you cast a white permanent, and Defiler of Instinct lets you ping something every time you cast a red permanent. You'd be happy to have any of them in pack 1, pick 1 situations. It is worth noting they do get better the more hard you can go in a specific color. And maybe that ends up being a little bit awkward, but most of your decks are going to have enough permanents in a single color that you can trigger these relatively easily. And at number 1, I have Temporal Firestorm. So a 5 mana sweeper that does 5 to the whole board is already a pretty good card. It wouldn't really be a bomb though, just because sweepers are so awkward in most limited formats. You don't have as much control over what your board looks like as you do in Constructed. You can't build a control deck with like no creatures and then cast this and have it be amazing because it's one-sided, but it would still be a very good card. What really pushes it into bomb status is the kicker option. You're really not going to cast this for 9 very often and save 2 of your creatures, but you can cast it for 7, do 5 to the whole board, which most likely kills everything except for your best creature, which you have phased out. That's absolutely devastating and not something your opponent can come back from. I mean, then again, that's already true of this as a 5 mana sweeper. Sometimes if you can set that up, it's going to be impossible for your opponent to come back from, but saving your best creature and blowing up everything else is the kind of thing that is near unbeatable. We've seen it before with a card like Dune Blast from Khans of Tarkir, and this feels like a Dune Blast level card. So those are my picks for the 10 biggest bombs in Dominaria United. If you want to own any of these powerful cards, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each of them. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, including many more MTG top 10s and a whole lot of limited content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting the channel, you can do that on Patreon or by becoming a channel member or by buying Need to Hone merch. You can find ways to do all of those things in the description. Thanks for watching.